Hello and welcome to this Unreal Engine from scratch tutorial. I'm going to show how to start a blank project, go through the typical game mode settings, and do a quick player movement using event dispatchers and even create an interface. You can use this on Windows. I'm on Ubuntu. You could probably use it on Mac as well. Unreal Engine is absolutely fantastic for beginners. But without further ado, let's get started. And down here in your content drawer, I'm going to right click and go to new folder. And I'm going to call this level. I'm going to create another new folder. And I'm going to call this one settings. And inside of the level folder, first we will hit File, New Level, click on Basic, hit Create, and then File, Save Current Level As, and inside here I'm going to go ahead and call this Basic. And if you were to hit play right now, you are what is called a default pawn. This has no code. It does have collisions, which is quite interesting. But to get the actual game and player and all the things set up, I'm going to go here into the settings folder, right click, and here we're going to go to blueprint class. Now Unreal Engine, you can use C++. Blueprints are their main form, especially for doing quick logic and things that aren't necessarily super intense. And you can make a lot of games with only blueprints. So here I'm going to type in game mode, and from this game mode base as the parent, I'm going to call this BP game mode. I'm going to right click, hit on blueprint class again, and here I'm going to type game instance, and we're going to use this one, select, and BP game instance. Right click again, blueprint class, and here I'm gonna let's see, we're gonna do game state. So I'm gonna type in game state and game state base BP game state. So with these three things here, we can link them to the game mode, and then we'll link the game mode to the project. So if I double click here on game mode, it opens up a new tab. You can click this and dock it in the same window that was previously, there. And here you can see we have a game session. There's a game state base thing, drop down, and here we can put in BP game state. There's a player controller, there's a player state, and so on and so forth. And so we're going to make a player state real quick, a player controller, and a HUD. So back here, I'm going to right click, blueprint class, and here I'm going to type in HUD, hit select. I'm going to call mine BP, and then HUD with all caps. Really doesn't matter what you name yours, but as long as you know what it is, that is perfectly okay. And here I'm going to type in player state. I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to call BP player state, and then finally we're going to make a controller. So right click, do blueprint class, and right here, player controller. I'm going to call this BP player controller. Back inside of the game mode, here we can set in our BP player controller, our BP player state, and our BP HUD. Now notice default pawn class is still set to default pawn. We will come back to this. For now I'm going to hit compile. And if you see these three dots here, I'm going to click them, go to save on compile, and say always. Hit compile again, and that way we don't have to compile and save. We can just hit compile. If we go to the edit, so open the edit menu and go to project settings and go to maps and modes on the left hand side under project. Here we have a few things. Up here, default game mode. This would be the game mode that we've been editing, the BP game mode. And then the bottom game instance class, this is going to be our BP game instance. And for here, we can do basic. This is going to be that map that we generated. And this is what the editor will start up on when we reopen the project. And this is what the game would originally have as the default map if you were to build it. And you can hit File, Save All, and Close. So here we have a very generic startup of the project. What I want to do real quick is I'm going to go back to the content drawer. I'm going to right click. I'm going to hit New Folder, and I'm going to call this Input. And inside the Input folder, I'm going to right click again. We're going to go to Input, and we're going to go down to Input Mapping Context. I'm going to call mine IM, so Input Mapping, and then I'm just going to call it Map, like that, with 2 P's. And I'm going to right click, make a new folder, and we're going to call this Actions. So this here is going to contain all the inputs that we can use in Unreal Engine, and we're going to link this map to our player controller, which is linked to our game mode, which is linked to our project. So if we go to Actions here, right click, go to Input, Input Action, I'm going to call this IA Move. I'm also going to right click, going to go to Input, Input Action, IA Look, and I'm also going to do one last one, Input, Input Action, IA Jump. Now, with these here, if we looked at Jump, for instance, it has a value type of digital Boolean. This means it's either you are or you are not. And we can leave Jump just as it is. However, with Look and Move, these are not just quite a on or an off, and it's better to have an axis 2D vector for movement and the camera rotation. So we're going to do that for both the Look and the IA Move under value type. Hit the drop down, make sure it's axis 2D vector. All right, go ahead and close those out, and let's go back into our input map. And here we see input modes, registration, description, and mappings. Under mappings, go ahead and hit this plus button and then hit the drop down. And on this drop down here, we have the different input actions we created. I'm going to go ahead and click on Input Action Move and hit the drop down. This here, this is, hey, what key is going to activate this? And I'm going to go ahead and hit plus, plus, and plus. So we have 4 keys that is going to be the movement. And I'm going to click on that and hit W, S, click on this one, A, click on that one, D. So W, S, A, and D is going to trigger our movement. And for now, I think the best way to think about this is with W, this is your forward vector, as in which way is the character facing, that's the way I want to move. So we're going to keep this modifier as 0. In S, this is the opposite of our forward vector. So we're going to hit the plus on modifier and go down to negate. This is the opposite. Similarly, our D key, this is the right, this is our right vector. And if we hit the plus button and hit on this drop down here and did swizzle input axis, this is going to swizzle the forward vector into the right vector. And similarly for A, it's the opposite of D, so we're going to need 2 of these, and we're going to have a swizzle input axis and a negate. And this is basically like all these keys are going to do that movement, and we're just telling, hey, these other keys, they have different rules in which that they're going to follow, and that is just fine. And if we notice, I can click this drop down here, I can click these drop downs there, but if I hit this plus button, we can create another input action I mean, we can insert another input action that we have created, and I'm going to do IA look. And here, you could hit this drop-down menu and pick what it is. I like to click and click again, and then I click the drop-down. Same difference, really. This, honestly, if you click the drop-down, it's probably faster. But under mouse and mouse XY 2D axis, you can click that. And I'm not going to change any of these values here. I'm going to leave them all as default. And I'm going to hit the plus button one more time. And under here, I'm going to hit IA jump. And for the button, I'm going to hit the space bar. And we're going to hit save and close. Now, we need to have the player controller know about this input map. So I'm going to go over to settings, BP player controller. I'm going to click on the event graph. I'm going to delete event tick because all of this stuff is going to happen on begin play. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to type in self, basically saying, hey, this player controller, and I'm going to drag off here. I'm going to type in enhanced. And do you see where it says get enhanced input local player subsystem? This is what we need. I'm going to drag off here and type in add mapping context. And on this drop down here, I can add in the input map. And we can drag this into this. Now, I'm going to leave it like this for a second. Hit compile. We'll revisit this. And for now, I'm going to go back a folder into content. I'm going to right click, hit a new folder, and call this game. Inside the game folder, I'm going to right click, blueprint class, and do character here. A character is a type of pawn. A pawn is an actor that can be possessed, and an actor is an object in the world. So here I will call this a BP player. And for now, I will hit save and go into the BP game mode. And under default pawn, I will hit BP player, compile, and hit play. If we click the mouse in, now we're kind of in the game. And if I hit WSAD, nothing happens. And if I hit escape, as you could tell, no movement happened. If we double clicked on the player, so I opened the BP player, and if I go to the event graph, I'm going to go ahead and delete all three of these nodes. Boop. And I'm going to hit right click and type input action, and for now let's do jump. So input action jump. I'm going to hit this drop down here, and it has a started and a completed. In Unreal Engine's character, it comes with a nice jump. So if I right click and type in jump, there's jump and stop jumping. We have jump. I'm going to right click again, type in jump again, and hit the stop jumping. Completed will feed into stop jumping. Started will feed into jump. We will hit compile, come over, hit play. I'm going to hit spacebar. We have some jumping, hit escape, and all is well. Now, like I said, we'd come back to this. In a lot of ways, to be safer, it's safer to drag off here and ask the program, hey, is this valid? This will prevent a lot of different issues that could come up. And this is what I would recommend for safety. This is checking, hey, is that enhanced input local player subsystem actually valid? Is it actually existing in my program? Then go ahead and do that. No big deal otherwise. But that's just my recommendation. So here, we have our jump. And this is perfectly acceptable. But I want to make a move and a look. What I like to do, I'm going to go ahead, make a new folder. I'm going to call this components. I'm going to right click. I'm going to also make a new folder, and I'm going to call this interfaces. Inside of the interfaces folder, I will right click, go to blueprint, come down to blueprint interface, and I'm going to call this BPI underscore player. And I'm going to open it. And for the function name, I'm going to call this function gather, or how about get player is what I'll call it. And for the outputs, I'll hit a plus, and here I'll type BP player, and I want a object reference, and I'm going to name this player. I will hit compile. Now an interface basically says, hey, whoever implements and defines this behavior will determine overall what it does, and then other blueprints will be able to call that behavior. So for instance here, if I go to class settings, under implemented interfaces, if I hit add and then type in BPI and click on player, we have the get player appear. If I double click there, notice it says get player and has a return node, nothing's here. I'm going to simply right click, type in get reference to the self. This is referencing this blueprint, and this is going to return this player instance. The reason I'm doing it like this is so we do not end up casting anywhere in the program for the player. So for example, in components, the folder components that I created, if I right click, do blueprint class, and do actor component, and I call this BPC move, and I hit enter, I'm going to go ahead and delete those. If I was to type something like, hey, get the owner, and I'm going to right click and say begin play here, and I said, hey, I want to cast to BP player, and then from here I would like to do something with player. Casting isn't necessarily bad, but if you can avoid it, it's overall better. And here's kind of the case here. Under the BP player, under event dispatcher, I'm going to click the plus button, and I'm going to call this on move. And under inputs here, where the plus button for new parameter is, if I click that and I put a X here for the name, and then the type will be of type float, and I'm going to hit another parameter, and I'm going to call this Y. And inside of our graph, if I right click and say input action move, this is that input action that we defined and placed inside the map, the input mapping context. It has a action value, and then on move here takes in an X and a Y. So if I click and drag and I say, hey, I want to call this function, it has a X and a Y. And this input action, if I right click and hit split struct pin, it also has a X and a Y. So we have something that looks like this. If I compile and go back to blueprint character move, after this cast here, if I drag off of as BP player and say bind on move, so bind event on move, then I could do a add custom event, and I'll call this move. This move function will run. It's binding to the player on begin play, and for this actual function, we could say, hey, I want the instigator from owner. I want to add movement input, and we're going to want 2 of those. And I'm going to plug the head of one into the tail of the other. And the direction would be forward vector. As we talked about W, and S, those would use the forward vector. The scale value is coming from the X, and then the A and the D would use the right vector, and the scale value would be coming from the Y. And if we plug that in and hit compile and hit play, notice nothing happens. Nothing happens because even though we're calling onMove, this is a Blueprint component. To be able to use that component, the BPC move, if we come over to components and hit the add button and type in BPC, we can find our move. I'll leave it just like this. I'll hit compile, I'll hit play, I'll click, and when I push W, S, A, and D, and we can still jump. So this here is fine. This is absolutely fine to do. And in fact, there's several ways to go about the same thing. This is closer to my preferred method. The only thing here is this cast. And the cast isn't overall wrong, but it's also not necessarily the best thing to do. What I would rather do is off of the owner here, if I did that function get player, and it sends a message. And here, if I did bind event on move, and then off of that create our custom event called move, and plug in the head and the X and the Y, this is much closer to being more efficient, right? Because we have a event dispatcher. The movement is kind of in its, since it's in its own Blueprint component, it's a little kind of lost for words in the way I'm trying to describe this, but basically it's obfuscated, right? It's a little bit decoupled in a sense, right? Like we have all this stuff that's not just going to be sitting right here in the player blueprint, and instead of using a cast, this message system is just checking, hey, who actually is implementing that interface? And of course, our movement still works, but we don't have the ability to move the camera yet. So here, I'm going to right click, go to Blueprint class, do actor component. I'm going to call this BPC look, and inside of this Blueprint component, delete the begin play and the tick. I'm going to right click, say get owner. Off of get owner, I'm going to call our get player message. I'm going to right click for a begin play. I'm going to drag that in. And off of here, I'm going to say bind on look and go, oh wait, I haven't created it, right? So back in player, add our on look event dispatcher. I'm going to right click, do input action, look, and on our on look here, we're also going to need a X and a Y. I'm going to drag this in and hit call. I'm going to right click on our action value, split the struct pin, plug in our X and our Y. And before we leave the player blueprint, I'm going to go ahead and hit add, type in BPC, and we're going to just add in this blueprint component look. And from here, back in our blueprint component look, I will drag off of player and say bind on look. So bind event to on look, and drag off of event, type in custom event, and type in look here. Now, all we need to do is get the yaw in the pitch being up and down, the yaw being side to side, X is side to side, Y is up and down. Off of our get owner, I'm going to call get instigator. Off of our instigator, I'm going to say yaw. And then I'm going to do the same thing and type in pitch. I'm going to plug in the head of yaw into the tail of pitch. I'm going to plug in the value X and connect those. And then for Y, I'm actually going to multiply by -1. And this is because my preferred camera movement, it results in this. The other one feels inverted to me. This feels a lot more accurate. So if I go ahead and hit play and I click the mouse, now we can move left, right, up, and down. And just to kind of show here, if we don't have that negative value and I compile and hit play, when I move my mouse forward, so I'm going to click and move mouse forward, that's down, and backwards is up. This doesn't quite feel like something I'm used to. So I like to, when I move my mouse forward, to look up, and when I move down move my mouse back, it moves down. The only thing here is, we have our input action map linking to our input actions. Our actions are calling event dispatchers. Our event dispatchers are binding these custom functions to these nodes that Unreal Engine provides. We can compile, we can play, move, jump. But the only thing is when I hit play, notice how the mouse, you have to click to be able to move. That's not something I prefer. And so inside of our settings folder that we created in the beginning, under BP HUD, if you double click into that and go to its event graph, I'm going to delete the event tick in the event actor begin overlap. And off of event begin play, I'm going to type in game mode and see where it says set input game mode only. I like to do this, and then you can drag off here and type in player controller and compile. Now when we hit play, we don't have to click at first. We are just in the game. So that's a basic way to get your Unreal Engine project started from a blank template, get player movement, a little bit of interface practice, and just for a little bit more of a reason to use that get player BPI. Well, I want to show real quick. So I'm going to have player open, and I'm going to right click here. I'm going to do a new blueprint class, do a actor, and we're going to call this bump me. And I'm going to open them up. I'm going to click on the add. I'm going to click on sphere. I'm going to click on add again and type in collision. And I'm going to use sphere collision here. And I'm going to set that sphere collision to the root. Off of that, I'm going to extend that until I just about see it. And while I'm clicked on this, I'm going to rename this to collision, and I'm going to, in the search bar, type in collision, and on this drop down I'm going to hit block all dynamic and compile, and on the sphere, while I'm still looking at collision, and hit the drop down menu and say no collision and hit compile. This is saying, hey, the mesh itself doesn't collide, but my collider collides. And if we drag this out, move it in the scene, I like to move it up and then hit the end key to drop it down. Now this object is in our scene. Now, typically, and I'm going to hit on collision here and hit the X. Typically, when you do a overlap or a on component hit, you would say, hey, my other actor, I'm going to cast this to my BP player, and then if this cast is true, then I'm going to destroy this actor, and then like maybe you get coins and whatnot, right? And you can imagine when you have a bunch of bullets in the scene and you're doing a lot of casts, it's not necessarily great, especially if you're doing a cast on tick. This is why here we have that get player message. And then we can destroy that actor. And here we could even say, hey, is this valid? Not necessary, but just to really show that there works. And yeah, so I know I went a little bit further, and that last part wasn't very necessary to show. I'm going to actually go ahead and delete that. But I really do hope that this tutorial on how to create a Unreal Engine project from scratch, from the ground up, and setting up all of your game modes and player states and all the things in here, and then adding them into the project using maps and modes, and linking your input actions to your player controller using the add mapping context. I hope all of that makes sense. I hope that you enjoyed possibly a new way to go about player movement using event dispatchers and an interface. And until next time, keep it real.